On January 13, 2006, a small pizza shop in Acasuso, Argentina, got a strange phone call. The local police were placing a massive order, 20 large pizzas, and they wanted them fast. The manager, puzzled but not overly concerned, asked what toppings they wanted. But the voice on the line wasn't interested in details. "Just 20 large pizzas," the officer said. "And hurry." Thinking it was probably for some big event or maybe a party at the station, the manager shrugged it off and shouted the order to the kitchen. But what he didn't know was that those pizzas weren't for the cops at all. In reality, the pizzas were part of an elaborate plan. 6 men had just taken over a branch of Banco Río in the Cetal district of Buenos Aires. And the police? They had unknowingly become part of the heist, acting as pizza delivery guys in one of the most brilliant bank robberies in Argentina's history. So, how did this team of 6 manage to walk away with $20 million and use pizza to pull it off without a single shot fired or alarm tripped? Rewind a couple of years before the big day. A man named Fernando Araujo was sitting at a bar with his friend, Sebastián García Bolster. They were talking about famous robberies in Argentina, the kind where criminals almost succeeded but always messed something up in the end. Araujo pointed out every flaw, every rookie mistake. Bolster laughed at first, but he quickly realized Fernando wasn't joking. He was seriously considering pulling off something big, something flawless. That night they both went home. But Fernando's mind kept spinning. He started watching every movie and documentary he could find about bank heists. He took notes. He studied plans. And slowly, a vision began to form. He wanted to design the perfect robbery, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. As Fernando Araujo continued mapping out his plan, he ran into a problem early on. He had no idea what the inside of the bank actually looked like. He didn't know how the vault was laid out, what kind of security system was in place, or even how thick the walls were. That kind of information was crucial. To solve that, he reached out to a contact. Someone who, for the right price, could get their hands on some blueprints. And the contact delivered big time. Not only did Fernando get detailed plans of Banco Rio's layout, but he also scored diagrams of the town's underground drainage system. As it turned out, a massive sewer line ran directly beneath the bank and opened up near a river just a few hundred meters away. That changed everything. Suddenly, Fernando didn't need to break in through the front door. He could build a tunnel, one that started in the drainage system and ended in the bank's basement. But tunneling through solid ground and concrete wasn't a one-man job. He needed tools. He needed an exit plan. And most importantly, he needed a team. His first recruit was obvious, Sebastián García Bolster, the same guy he'd been chatting with at the bar. Sebastián was a mild-mannered family man with no criminal record. On the surface, he looked like the last person who'd ever get involved in a bank robbery. But there was something else. Sebastián ran a small tool shop. He spent his days repairing engines and tinkering with custom power tools. If anyone could build the specialized equipment they'd need to break into a vault, it was him. Fernando pitched him the idea. At first, Sebastián hesitated. But then he remembered what Argentina had been through. Back in the early 2000s, the country suffered one of its worst economic collapses. The Argentine peso lost nearly 70 to 80% of its value against the dollar. Banks froze personal accounts. People couldn't withdraw their own money. Families lost their savings overnight. Trust in the banking system was shattered, and Sebastián, like many others, had been burned. So finally he said yes. But even with 2 people, they were nowhere near ready. They needed more hands, more tools, and someone to fund the entire operation. Realizing that just the 2 of them couldn't pull off something of this scale, Fernando and Sebastián started looking for the right people to join their mission. They were careful. This wasn't the kind of job you could advertise. Every member had to be chosen with precision. They needed people who were not only skilled but also trustworthy and ready to commit to the long game. In the weeks that followed, they assembled a crew of 6, including a financier who agreed to cover the cost of all the gear they'd need. This wasn't going to be a smash and grab. It was going to take months of preparation, equipment, and engineering. They began gathering materials: masks, gloves, inflatable rubber boats, disguises, and even a getaway van with custom modifications. Sebastian took a particularly clever step. He opened a new bank account, not at the same branch they planned to rob, but at another branch of Banco Rio. The idea was to gain access to a real vault and examine its design, dimensions, and locking mechanisms. Back at his tool shop, he practiced opening locks and safes just like the ones they'd be dealing with on the big day. Meanwhile, the team started work underground. Using the sewer blueprints, they began digging a diagonal tunnel from the drainage system straight toward the bank's basement. It was slow, exhausting work, done in secret over the course of several months. They worked mostly at night and hauled dirt out a little at a time to avoid drawing attention. They weren't just building a tunnel, they were building an escape route, a clean exit that would make it almost impossible for authorities to figure out how they disappeared. As the plan moved forward, each person on the team was assigned a specific role. On the surface, they blended in: mechanics, husbands, everyday citizens. But behind the scenes, they were engineering one of the most audacious bank heists Argentina had ever seen. The clock was ticking and the date was set. Everything had to go perfectly. January 13, 2006, the day had finally come. All 6 members of the crew met up at a local bar early in the morning. Calm, focused, and ready, they split off to carry out their assigned roles. Everything they'd worked on for months was about to be put to the test. Sebastian Garcia Bolster headed straight to the tunnel. He'd already reached the basement of the bank, hidden behind the wall of the vault room. Fernando Araujo, disguised in a blonde wig and posing as a regular bank customer, was already inside the bank when the operation began. The rest of the team, Mario Vitet, Alberto Beto, De La Torre, and Marcelo Mendoza, made their way to the front of Banco Rio. Meanwhile, Julian Zalo Echeverria positioned the modified getaway van over a manhole cover a few blocks away, pretending it had broken down. The van had a secret hole in the floor that connected directly to the sewer system. It was their exit point. At exactly 12:30 p.m., Beto and Mendoza walked through the bank's main entrance, pulled out fake weapons, and shouted that this was a robbery. The scene was loud and chaotic, just what they needed to trigger the silent alarm. Within 20 minutes, police had surrounded the building, believing they were dealing with a standard hostage situation. What they didn't know was that the real action was happening below ground. Beto slipped away and made his way down to the basement, where Sebastian was waiting. He smashed through the final section of the wall, and together they entered the vault room. Now came the hard part, opening as many safety deposit boxes as possible and grabbing everything of value. But they ran into a snag. The locks were tougher than expected, and progress was slow. Upstairs, Vitet, using the alias Walter, acted as the negotiator. He spoke calmly to police, standing near the door so they could see him. This helped sell the illusion that the robbers were still inside, indecisive and maybe even ready to give up. He hinted at surrender, giving the police false hope and keeping them relaxed. But the truth? Downstairs, the crew was racing against time. As tension built outside the bank, Vitet, still playing the role of the fake negotiator, Walter, came up with one of the most unexpected and brilliant stalling tactics imaginable. He asked the police if they could order some pizzas. His request seemed harmless, even silly. He claimed the group wanted to end things peacefully and figured they'd at least enjoy one last meal before surrendering. To the police, it sounded like a bunch of desperate amateurs trying to lighten the mood. But that was exactly the illusion the crew wanted to project. A group of chaotic criminals making things up as they went. In truth, the pizza order was a calculated move. Fernando had done his homework. He figured out that it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to prepare and bake a single large pizza. By ordering 20 pizzas, they could buy themselves an extra 2 to 3 hours, and that's exactly what they needed. The police, believing they were defusing a volatile situation, picked up the phone and placed the order with a local pizza shop. The manager, slightly confused but compliant, shouted the massive request to the kitchen. Nobody suspected a thing. Meanwhile, the real heist was still going strong beneath their feet. With the added time, Beto and Sebastian managed to crack open more and more of the vault boxes. They stuffed bags with whatever they could carry: stacks of cash, gold bars, expensive jewelry, anything that looked valuable. Every second counted. They weren't just robbing a bank. They were trying to vanish without a trace. By 4 p.m., it was time to disappear. The team regrouped in the basement, grabbed their loaded bags, and slipped into the tunnel. One by one, they made their way through the dark, narrow passage they had spent months digging. A few hundred feet later, they reached the exit point inside the drainage system, where Sebastian had stashed a pair of inflatable boats ahead of time. The crew climbed in and paddled upstream, toward freedom. Waiting for them near a manhole was Julian, sitting in the disguised getaway van. He popped the cover open, helped them climb in through the hidden floor panel, and by 5 p.m., they were gone. No violence, no alarms, and not a single officer suspecting where they had actually gone. When the police finally stormed the bank, they were expecting a standoff or maybe a last-minute escape attempt. But what they found was nothing. The robbers were gone. The hostages were safe and untouched. All that remained was a cleaned-out vault and a handwritten note that read something like, "In a wealthy neighborhood, without guns or grudges, it's just money, not love." It was the ultimate mic drop. For a while, the robbery seemed like the perfect crime. The media went wild. The public was stunned. Some were even impressed. How had these 6 ordinary-looking people pulled off a $20 million heist right under the noses of the police? The mystery only made the legend grow. But, as with many great stories, it wasn't destined to stay perfect forever. One of the robbers, Alberto Beto de la Torre, had a rocky relationship with his wife. She'd often accused him of being distant, emotionally checked out. After the heist, their problems only got worse. He started acting strange, and eventually, she caught him cheating. Heartbroken and furious, she didn't just confront him, she went straight to the police. And she didn't hold back. She spilled everything: how he had been involved in the Banco Río robbery, who he worked with, and where they might find the stolen goods. Her tip triggered a full-scale investigation. The police raided Beto's house and uncovered a stash of cash and jewelry that matched the stolen items from the bank. With him in custody, it wasn't long before the rest of the crew was tracked down, one by one. All 6 members of the heist team were eventually arrested and sentenced. The crime that had taken months of meticulous planning and was pulled off with near-surgical precision was unraveled by something no one had predicted: a betrayed heart. Still, their legacy remains. To this day, the Banco Rio heist is remembered not just for the amount stolen, but for the calm, clever, and almost cinematic way it was carried out. A real-life story that feels straight out of a Hollywood script.